Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you're joining me for this video. Thank you once again for clicking on the PenBoyRoy Fountain Pen Review channel. The subject of today's video, the Conklin Duraflex. Neutral zone, the good, the bad, the ugly, and high noon on this pen. I'm going to go over some background information. However, I'm going to go through it quick because I've done Conklin pens before. I'll leave the links of those in the description below if you want to check them out. The one for the word gauge is rather old. It was before I discovered video technology. The one after the word gauge, the Conklin Classic, was after I discovered video technology, and I went a little bit crazy, so it's a little bit more cinematic and off the wall. But here goes. In 1898, a currently dead dude who wasn't dead at the time established a brand called Conklin, and what he did was he made innovative filling mechanisms, such as the crescent filler, the piston filler. A lot of those pens were designed not to roll off a table, which was good. In the 1950s, company went under, they stopped making pens, and then in the year 2009, Jaffa, the distributors of Stipula, Peniter, and other brands, bought the rights to Conklin. They now own the Conklin name. This year, they released a pen called the Conklin Duraflex. This has what's called an Omniflex nib. That's all for the background information. Moving on to the neutral zone, those elements about the pen that are neither good or bad, or can be good or bad, depending on you. Now I'm going to start with the nib. The nib is a black spear-shaped nib with scallops cut out the side to enable flexing. It is unbranded. Unlike other Conklin nibs that have a crescent breather hole, this one doesn't have a crescent breather hole. It has more of a Flintstones front door shaped hole, or a mouse house shaped door. The shaft of the nib that goes into the housing is longer than usual. The overall nib looks like a fighter jet, or a spear, or a spade. It's shiny black, much like the Conklin word gauge. The feed is your standard cheapy plastic feed that you see on a lot of the Stipula pens, Jinhao pens, Chinese branded pens, etc. The nib and feed are part of an unscrewable nib unit that can interchange between other Conklin fountain pens such as the All-American, the Herringbone, the other Duragraphs. The grip section is also interchangeable with other Duragraphs. If you look at it, it's the same size, specs, and shape. Let's take a look at the cap. On the top of the cap, you have our finial, and on the top of the finial, you have the same logo that's on all your other Conklin Duragraphs with the same slight crooked printed brand name that says Conklin, and underneath it, established 1898. The body of the cap is straight cylindrical that meets the center band that says on the front Conklin, and on the back it says Duragraph with 3 crescents on both sides of the word. Underneath the center band is the bottom of the cap assembly. This is where our cap threads are, and these cap threads screw on to the body threads, which are also acrylic. Let's take a look at the thread assembly on the grip section. These threads are metal, and these screw into acrylic threads on the body. These metal threads render this pen uneyedroppable. Let's take a look at the body. It says Duraflex limited edition, and then the edition number out of 1898. After that, you have the end band that separates the bottom finial of the pen. This pen requires 3 full rotations to cap and uncap, unlike Duragraphs, which require only 1 full rotation. The pen came inside your standard Conklin coffin-shaped rectangular box. On the inside, you have these 2 cards, warranty information, brand information, etc. Then your bedding. Underneath the bedding is the 2 ink cartridges that were included. This pen fills using cartridges, obviously, as well as an included threaded ink converter. This pen is also compatible with non-threaded ink converters. That's all I have for the neutral zone. Moving on to the good. Those elements about the pen that are good. As usual, I like to start with the nib. It looks really cool. Moving on, the overall shape, size, dimension, and feel of this pen is very solid. Well manufactured, well articulated. I have to say more so than other Duragraphs. Tolerances seem more tight. The look of this pen is very luxurious. One of the things I appreciate most about this pen is the threaded ink converter. That's all I got for the good. Moving on to the bad. Let's talk coin. The MSRP of this pen is $60. When it comes to the price, I have nothing really bad to say. I appreciate the fact that your standard Conklin Duragraph will cost about $52 to $56 depending on where you buy it. This one is $60. So in this case, we're not getting hit over the head by Jaffa or Conklin just because it says limited edition. However, any amount of money is not good if the product in question fails at what it was designed to do. Having said that, let's move on to the ugly. Those elements about the pen that should not be, but are. This pen, the Conklin Duraflex, as it says on the box, equipped with an Omniflex nib, is supposed to be a flex nib fountain pen. The wording I think is a little bit redundant because if it wasn't equipped with an Omniflex nib, or any kind of flex nib whatsoever, then you can't really call it the Conklin Duraflex, can you? Now, Omni means entire or whole or fully. So to say something's an Omniflex nib is to say it's a full flex nib, or entirely flex nib, or fully flex nib. While there's some truth in this, I think what's important to talk about is the fact that when you do flex this nib, it does take a moderate amount of pressure, not nearly as much as, say, a Noodler's Ahab or a Noodler's Nib Creeper or Noodler's Conrad, but it does take a good amount of pressure. It's a little bit more than I would say an Aurora Optima. Now, while this nib does in fact flex, what is terribly disappointing about this model is that the feed is not modified in such a way to provide the necessary ink flow in order to achieve full flex. What you have here is the ability to get a good amount of line variation with a good amount of pressure. However, by the time you do get a couple of swirls in or a few letters in, and at most maybe a couple of words, the supply of ink starves dramatically. Then you got to do your tapping, your shaking, your touching the nib to the paper, waiting for the feed to saturate again. This isn't the end of the world. What's the deal breaker for me in this case is the fact that the nib, virtually and practically, always hard starts. Why? Because it has a bad case of baby's bottom. Now what happens when you have baby's bottom is the ink, even though present, never makes it to the page. Why? Because it doesn't make it to the end of the tines of the nib. And even if it does go as far as to the end of the tines, capillary action stops where the rounded edges of the nib open up. That's really annoying. So in order for you to get ink flow going, there has to be a fresh dot of ink, at least one fresh dot of ink on the page, and then that dot of ink will draw the ink halted in between the tines to it, and then you can continue your writing. This nib sees more baby's bottom than 1,000 diapers. This thing hard starts as a result all the time. This nib also railroads due to ink starvation. Not a good thing. Although the nib is smooth when it is writing, what you should also know is that the tipping of the nib, while smooth, is inconsistent. Some areas of the nib tipping is hot butter on glass, while others have grab, while others have tooth and feedback. On top of that, this pen has an overall look that is very sophisticated, luxurious, and classy. And the top branding really kills it. If the top branding wasn't there, this pen would look like it costs as much as a Mont Blanc, which is a lot. And also to talk a little bit about the packaging it came in, with the exception of the outer cardboard box. It's otherwise all the same. Maybe they could have went a step further and changed it up so that way it feels like you're actually getting something limited. Now, these nibs are going to appear on other pens and you have the option to have them on other pens. Question is, has the brand solved the riddle? How to modify a feed to provide sufficient ink flow? Based on this pen here, the answer is absolutely not. As a matter of fact, there are few that have. It's high noon, decision-making time. Should you or should you not pull the trigger on the Conklin Duraflex with the alleged Omniflex nib? If you're looking for a full flex fountain pen that flexes in the way a vintage-style fountain pen does, then I would say save up your coin, invest money in a fully flexible 14-karat gold nib made by Linda Kennedy of Independence. She was trained thoroughly by Richard Binder, and he is the person who figured out the riddle of both the nib and the feed, the modifications required for both, so that they work in concert, so that you have a fully flexible nib that has a sufficient amount of ink flow without the railroading, the skipping. But like I said before, do not pull the trigger on this pen, you will be disappointed. However, at an MSRP of $60, I do have to say that this is the cheapest option that's below $100 that doesn't smell like a butthole. But the tuning and adjusting and quality control when it comes to the actual nib failed. And therefore, to call this a flex nib is inaccurate. I know that sounds harsh. I'm sorry, but if you're looking for flex, this is not the place to look. That has been my review of the Conklin Duraflex. I hope you found it helpful. Be well, be safe.